Hey, before you start, this episode includes a racial slur. Take care when listening. Gurbaj Singh Multani is 11 years old, and it's lunchtime. He's heading home from school for the hour. It's a short walk. He's got his basketball with him as usual, and on his way, he stops to shoot some hoops in the schoolyard. It's all a very normal day, until something happens that has never happened before. His kirpan, the small dagger he wears under his belt, falls onto the ground. Looking back now, Gurbaj remembers that he didn't think much of it at the time.
I picked the kirpan and put it back under my clothes. I secured it and started walking towards home.
But when Gurbaj comes back to school after lunch, he gets called into an empty classroom. The school's principal is there, and she opens the school agenda. She shows him the part about safety. It says that weapons are prohibited. Then she asks the 11-year-old a question.
So do you have any weapon or a knife on you? I was like, I don't have no knife on me. And she said, you do have something under your clothes. So I was like, yes, that's kirpan. That's not a weapon. That's my symbol of faith. But she said, no, this weapon is not allowed. And she gave me the option. It's either I leave the school or I can hand her the kirpan and then collect it from her at the end of the school. And I can do that every day.
Gurbaj weighs the decision. He can hand over his kirpan, a constant symbol of his commitment to his Sikh faith, or get kicked out of school. It sounds like a tough choice, but for Gurbaj, it's simple.
I decided to go home and not take off the kirpan.
I'm Falen Johnson, and this is See You in Court, a podcast about the cases that changed Canada. Today, we have the case of Multani versus La Commission Scolaire Marguerite-Bourgeoys. It's a story of an 11-year-old boy who was thrust into the middle of a national debate about multiculturalism and religious freedoms, a debate that continues today. And it all started in that schoolyard in 2001 when Gurbaj was in grade 6. Sonali Karnick has the rest of the story. Okay, so Sonali, in grade 6, my biggest concern was my Pogs collection. But Gurbaj is standing up to a grown-up, his school principal no less, and saying, well, no, I won't hand over my kirpan. Why does he take this stand?
You know, it's a gutsy move for a tween. But what you need to know about Gurbaj is that he always had a really strong connection to his faith from a really young age. In Sikhism, you can get baptized at any point in your life as long as you feel ready. And he remembers being 6 years old, crying at the baptism of his brother and his mother because he wanted to be included so badly.
I told him I want to do it. My determination was there. That kind of stuck to me all the way up till now. I have that memory right embedded in my mind.
Okay, so he's got baptism FOMO.
Well, you know, and a few years later, he moves to Canada, to Montreal, and Gurbaj really embraces this new life.
And one of the goals was to learn French in Quebec because it was important if you're living in Quebec. So the goal was to go to French school.
That's the plan, but the French school with a program for new immigrants is full, so Gurbaj and his brother end up at a Christian private school taught in English.
I definitely learned about different cultures, and when I moved to Canada, being in multicultural people, at that age, I was not concerned of why these people are different.
It takes a year, but eventually he transfers to French public school, Sainte-Catherine-Labouré, in the fall of 2001.
Okay, and that's the school where his kirpan drops out of his clothes and onto the basketball court.
That's right. It's just a few months into the school year when this meeting with his principal happens and he gets the ultimatum. And Gurbaj decides he'd rather stay home than to have to remove his kirpan at school. At first, his parents try to meet with the school to explain. To them, the kirpan is not a weapon, it's a religious symbol, and only about as sharp as a butter knife.
Right. And he can't be the only Sikh kid who's worn one to school, right?
Definitely not. The family even lines up a couple of Sikh university students to help them make their case. These are kids who went through elementary and high school in Quebec while wearing a kirpan, all without any problems.
Okay, so lots of kids have gone through school wearing a kirpan, so it seems like this should be no big deal.
It seems like it, but this is the first time we know of that it's fallen out and someone noticed.
And so it becomes an issue for the school. What happens next?
So at first, the district school board says Gurbaj can wear his kirpan to school as long as he follows certain conditions so that it's secured. The family agrees.
Certain conditions. I'm with you.
But the governing board of the school is not okay with this. They say the kirpan violates the code of conduct, which prohibits weapons. And then the school board's council of commissioners backs the ban. They now say Gurbaj can't bring a kirpan to school.
Okay, so essentially here we have layers of school administration overriding each other's decisions. And in the end, the school board says no kirpans at school.
Exactly. And school trustees explain it like this.
It's not the religious item that's put in question, but the nature of the item. We have to understand that we have a potentially violent society.
The school board says he can wear a pendant instead, or a kirpan made of another material, like rubber, that's less dangerous. But this idea isn't acceptable to the Multanis, and by now, the story is catching the attention of the media.
Gurbaj Singh used to go to school. Now he studies at home. The reason? His kirpan, a ceremonial dagger worn by Sikhs.
In the news videos at the time, you can see a young Gurbaj in his black turban, surrounded by reporters, trying to find the words to express himself at just 12 years old. His face looks exhausted by all of this.
I feel very sad. It's like disappointing.
Why?
Because it's my religion sign. It's my right, our prophet.
That's so sad listening to that. He sounds so small.
He is. He's an elementary schooler, remember, and he really just wants to go back to class. You know, we're not even halfway through the school year yet. All Gurbaj knows is that to stay in Quebec with his family, he needs to speak French. He also knows his best shot at learning the language is staying in French school. Instead, he's homeschooling, trying to keep up with his studies. When nobody can come to an agreement about wearing his kirpan to school, Gurbaj and his family decide to take the school board to court.
After the Rosenberg case that we had.
The Multanis need a lawyer, and the person they choose to represent them is not just any lawyer.
And they came to see me, and, I thought the case was interesting.
With the help from their Gurdwara, they hire one of the most prominent human rights lawyers in Quebec, a man named Julius Gray.
I did make one point to them that I was not defending it because of religion. I was defending all these things because of conscience.
Bringing Julius Gray into this fight ups the ante. He's just tried 2 court cases about religious exemptions and won them both. He agrees to help the Multanis fight the kirpan ban in Quebec Superior Court, arguing it's an unjustified infringement on religious freedom.
I personally have no religion, and I don't think immigrants should stay forever in a multicultural world. I think people should integrate and assimilate and not be visible. But that's not something that the government can require.
Wow, not be visible. That's not the take that I would expect from a human rights lawyer.
Yeah, well, Falen, I think this is worth a little Quebec-splaining for people outside of the province. There's a long history here of debates about secularism and about how visible religious symbols should be. It goes back to the 1960s when there was a big push to make Quebec society secular and root out the influence of the Catholic Church on public life. So debates like this one are intertwined with ideas of identity and cultural pride, and they become very charged.
And they are still very charged.
Well, exactly. And Julius Gray says that as the debate over the kirpan escalated, as with many issues that come up in this province, it became a matter of Anglophones versus Francophones.
There was never an acceptance from the Francophone side. I would be accosted by people who admired most of the things I did, said, how can you defend a knife in school? Everything but not that. From the start, there was a tremendous division between the attitude towards this case on the English side, where many people thought, the way I do, that I don't need religion, but they do. That's their conscience. And on the Francophone side, where they saw it arming children in school.
And there's another layer to the discussion. I'm South Asian, and I remember speaking with some members of my community who aren't Sikh, who felt the Multanis should have just followed school policy and left the kirpan at home. Others defended the family, said the kirpan was never a weapon, but there was a concern at the time that the whole case brought negative attention to the South Asian community.
So I'm assuming these were conversations that weren't being had in public.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget, a lot of people who were having these conversations were expected to be model immigrants. So to be what white people thought they should be. They didn't want to ruffle any feathers. They just wanted to keep to themselves and keep quiet and blend in quietly. Right. So it also was a time when the makeup of Quebec had been changing a lot because of immigration. And remember, Falen, this story is happening right after 9/11. Racist incidents are on the rise for any visible minority. It doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or not. If you aren't white, you become a target.
Okay, wow. So Gurbaj is wading into a lot of history that he probably doesn't even know about.
I mean, probably not. He's all of 12 years old at the time, and all of this is going on in the background as the Multanis and their lawyer argue at Quebec Superior Court for Gurbaj's right to wear the kirpan.
So how does the court end up ruling on the case?
You know, despite the societal pushback, the Quebec court rules in favor of Gurbaj. The judge says the ban on wearing a kirpan is unjustified infringement on his religious freedom. And what it means for Gurbaj is that he can return to school wearing his kirpan, but under certain conditions. Basically, he needs to ensure that it's sealed under his clothing. It's a win for Gurbaj and his family, but it also puts him in the center of a pretty divisive debate.
At one school in LaSalle, some parents made the kirpan an issue. They didn't want Gurbaj Singh to wear his kirpan at school.
On his very first day back, police have to walk Gurbaj to school.
I was escorted and there were parents outside the school and shouting. My head was down and I was just going inside the school, and I just wanted to get into the class and get on going with my studies.
These are adults yelling at a child. And on top of these protests, about 30 parents also pull their children out of the school. It's an ugly scene, and you can hear it in some of the language thrown at Gurbaj that day.
They were telling me, go back to your country, and they were calling me Paki, and I was like, okay, I think they're ignorant.
Gurbaj walks in with his head down, trying to block out all of this noise. But amidst this awful scene, he has faith that people just need some time.
When I heard people shouting and screaming at me, and I was like, okay, it's just for a few days. They will learn, they will know and learn about our religion. They'll be okay, and it will be all over. Unfortunately, I only lasted a few hours in school, and I was sent home again.
He's sent home because that very same day, the school board appeals the Superior Court judgment.
So he's escorted to school by police, yelled at by adults, only to be sent home again before the school day is out.
That's right. Members of his Gurdwara show up to walk him home this time. So he's back in limbo about wearing his kirpan to school as the case goes back to court. And even though he's only 12, Gurbaj has a pretty grown-up understanding of what's going on.
Yes, it's my religion. I'm practicing it. I'm not forcing it on you to practice it. Then why are you targeting me?
But it isn't just Gurbaj who's targeted.
My family started getting death threats. My parents were telling me about you have to be careful. We're getting calls at home, and I wasn't able to go outside alone anymore. It was challenging times. I definitely felt my freedom was restricted, that I can't do a lot of things that I was doing. I used to go outside the building with my friends and start playing cricket. Can't do that no more.
So it sounds like this time really compromised his childhood.
Oh, I think he was robbed of it for a while, frankly. And, he's back to being homeschooled now. He's constantly in front of the media under all this pressure. They're calling him the Kirpan kid. So after a few weeks, the family gets word the Court of Appeal strikes down the Superior Court judgment. Gurbaj cannot wear his kirpan to school, at least not in a Quebec public school. So he returns to that English private school, the one that has no issue with him wearing his kirpan. And while it's nice to be back in class, Gurbaj didn't fight the fight to go to an English school. So with all other options exhausted, Gurbaj has one last step he can take. And that's the Supreme Court of Canada. It's 2005 now. Gurbaj is in grade 10. His case against the French Public School Board is still winding its way through the courts. The little boy at the center of this battle is now a full-blown teenager. His facial hair is coming in. He's taller. He's more confident. He's also back attending English private school where he's allowed to wear his kirpan, and there are no parents protesting on the school's lawn. His legal team has been waiting to see if the Supreme Court will hear his case. Then word finally comes at the end of a school day.
I stepped out and there was huge media and they told me, hey, your hearing is coming up and what do you think about it? And I was put on the spot. So I was very happy because after 4 years, finally the court was going to, hear the case.
When the time finally comes, the family hops in their car to make the drive to Ottawa to the Supreme Court of Canada. For Gurbaj, it's an awesome experience.
Walking in front of the door, it was great entrance, like high ceiling. It was amazing. It was a feeling of walking into like a mansion or something. My thing was, okay, I'm gonna walk into a courtroom because that's what we used to see in the TVs, like small courtroom. There's one judge sitting there and people talking, but the perspective changed as soon as I walked into a huge room, at least 100 seats, 8 judges. I counted 8 or 9 judges there. It was remarkable. I was very amazed.
Heading into court, you can hear Gurbaj is optimistic. His lawyer, Julius Gray, less so.
There were people on our side, and then there was the government side, the school board side. The lead counsel there was the late François Aquin, a very good lawyer, very nationalistic, and very much in the line of Quebec secularism. He would have been.
The lawyers for the school board argue that it's trying to protect the students from weapons in school, and there shouldn't be a religious exemption for the kirpan. And then Julius Gray stands up and addresses the court. He argues that the ban is an infringement on Gurbaj's freedom of religion, and there is no history in Canada for the kirpan being used as a weapon.
Mr. Julius Gray, he just rocked the floor. The experience was very different. I never experienced that in my life before, sitting in a court and listening to arguments like that. And it was a good feeling. I was like, whatever the outcome will be, we were ready for it.
I feel like hearing a lawyer being described as someone who rocks the floor feels very special.
It really does. And then Gurbaj has to just wait for the decision with a little more than a year left in his high school education. Time is just running out. And it takes nearly a year for a decision.
The Supreme Court of Canada has struck down a Montreal school board's ban on the wearing of ceremonial daggers by Sikh students.
In the ruling, Justice Louise Charon wrote religious tolerance is a very important value of Canadian society, and that an absolute ban of the kirpan would stifle the promotion of values such as multiculturalism and diversity. Charon found that though the kirpan is indeed a weapon, the risk that Multani would use it as one is highly unlikely. Besides, she wrote, if someone wanted to commit a violent act, there are more easily obtained items such as scissors, pencils, and baseball bats.
Justice Sharon pointing out that there are weapons all over the school.
Yeah. And Sharon's ruling includes accommodations for wearing the kirpan. It has to be in a cloth bag, which is sewn into the clothing so that it can't be open. The decision says it's impossible to ensure complete safety, but that, quote, Over the 100 years since Sikhs have been attending schools in Canada, not a single violent incident related to the presence of kirpans in schools has been reported. 16-year-old Gurbaj is surrounded by the media after the ruling, asking for his thoughts about the end of this years-long battle. And Falen, he's a little taller now, his beard has grown in, and he is just beaming with pride.
I feel very good. I feel it's good that we won. We won our right. Everybody should stand for their rights. I got it. I'm happy with that.
It was the moment of relief that finally it's over. It's over, and it's even over for people who didn't even start for all the kids who probably would have suffered in the future for same kind of thing. It was a proud moment to be a Canadian. It was a proud moment that the system works. The system recognizes your rights, and you just gotta believe in the system.
You can really hear what it meant for teenage Gurbaj to go through all of this. And you can tell all these years later how much more he's reflected on it and what a proud moment this is for him.
He's definitely happy that the ruling is in his favor, but by the time it comes, it's too late. He's graduating high school at this point from an English private school. Despite this long fight, the court battle, threats to him and his family, he wins the judgment, but he doesn't get the thing he most wants, to go to school in French. And I should mention, Falen, that I reached out to the school board that lost this case, La Commission Scolaire Marguerite-Bourgeoys, but they didn't give us an interview or a statement. A lot of people were thrilled with this decision, like the Sikh community in Canada, but others were still not okay with anyone wearing a kirpan to school, like the Quebec Federation of Parent Committees.
My reaction is one of disappointment. I had hoped that we would be able to take a stand on the notion of weapons in our schools.
A couple of years later, in 2008, a poll by the research firm SUM found that 87% of Quebecers remained opposed to allowing the kirpan in schools. So this is definitely a case where you can change the law, but you can't change people's minds.
So Gurbaj wins a bittersweet victory. The court agrees with his right to wear his kirpan, but most Quebecers don't. And he misses the chance to go to school in French. Where does this leave him?
Well, he goes to university in Montreal and even works here for a few years. But, in the end, he struggles to make a future for himself without being fluent in French.
I studied accounting, so I wanted to work with the government. I was applying, but the challenge that I was facing was the language. I was not very fluent. When I didn't have opportunity to go to French school and did not have the opportunity to engage the way I should have engaged at the very young age, it kind of limited me. But my goal was never to leave Quebec.
But Falen, Gurbaj did leave Quebec. He lives in Sudbury now with his wife and young children. He works for the federal government. His wife is also from Montreal. They do want to return to the province, but, between work and taking care of young kids, it's tough to find time to do anything, let alone perfecting your language skills. But there's another reason he's not sure about returning to Quebec, and that's Bill 21.
And that's the bill that prohibits the wearing of religious symbols in many Quebec public sector jobs. And the Supreme Court of Canada has actually agreed to hear a challenge of it. So what does the law mean for Gurbaj?
So the bill actually doesn't apply to his kirpan because it's not visible, but Gurbaj does wear a turban. And that's making him rethink his plan to eventually move back to the province he still calls home.
The government of Quebec keeps stricting the rules. Like, I wear a turban to work every day. Now, if I'm in the government sector, the Bill 21 will prohibit me to wear a turban at the workplace. So I decided to move out because I wanted to grow. I just didn't want to stay in Quebec and waste more of my years, keep struggling and, not get what I really wanted.
So he wants to come back to Quebec, but not if he doesn't have opportunities here.
I mean, considering what's happening, yeah, and what the future looks like for a Sikh man is really an open question in his mind.
And it makes me wonder whether Quebec has changed much since this ruling.
Well, the Supreme Court ruling was a watershed moment for multiculturalism, but this case was the start of a few very tumultuous years in Quebec about religious accommodation. I asked Gurbaj's lawyer, Julius Gray, what he thinks would have happened if this kind of case went to the courts today.
In the atmosphere today, courts are not slamming Quebec nationalist legislation or sensibilities. We would have lost it.
So Julius figures Quebec laws may be even less open to multiculturalism so many years after this case.
Yes, but Gurbaj, as you may have noticed, is an optimist, and he believes this fight was worth it. He speaks publicly about this case. He gives talks about his experience. He says his kids are pretty young, so he can't really explain what he went through, but one day, you know what, they might be searching online and find Multani against Commission scolaire Marguerite-Bourgeoys as one of the most important cases that went before the Supreme Court of Canada. And he's making sure his kids have a chance that he didn't have. They're in a French-speaking daycare right now.
The initiative is always there. It is never to give up because we went through a rough system, or maybe the governments are not doing what they were supposed to do to protect minorities and make sure the religion is practiced the way it's supposed to be practiced. We have faith. We have faith in our religion. We have faith in people around us. And we're just doing what we can do and hope for the best.
If you like this episode, share it with a friend, someone who'd want to hear about people like Gurbaj who took on the law and changed the way we live. And that couldn't be more true for next week's story. Henry Morgenthaler's name is synonymous with abortion access in Canada. We're going to take you inside his harrowing fight and find out why this doctor put his life on the line for women's right to choose. You've been listening to See You in Court. The show is hosted and produced by me, Falen Johnson. This episode was written and reported by Sonali Karnick. Kevin Sexton also helped produce the story. Catherine Rolfson is our senior producer. Sam McNulty is our sound designer. Carla Hilton is our executive producer.